I felt my heart shatter as I stood there in that room, watching my husband, Mark, bask in the glory of his newfound fame. 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears, all poured into him, everything I had, every ounce of strength I had ever given. He was now Professor Mark Carter, celebrated by all. But then, there she was, Emily Shen, his first love, standing right next to him, the woman who had always lingered in the background. My breath caught in my throat as Mark, with a smile so cold it could freeze hell, shoved the divorce papers in front of me. "Grace, you're not worthy of me anymore," he sneered, his voice as sharp as a blade. "Leave with nothing." Something inside me cracked open in that moment. But instead of crying, I felt rage, the kind of rage that smolders quietly before it burns everything in its path. All the years I spent slaving away for his success had led to this. I was nothing to him. His words, his betrayal, the history of my sacrifice, all of it crashed over me in a violent wave. But that was before I opened my eyes and found myself back in 1985, the very day Mark received his college acceptance letter. I stood there, staring at the letter in my hands, feeling like I had been gifted a second chance. It was like everything was frozen in time, yet moving at a pace that I could finally control. This time, I wouldn't make the same mistakes. I wouldn't follow the path of submission and self-sacrifice. My mother-in-law barked orders at me like a queen, demanding my dowry passbook to fund Mark's tuition. Like it was my duty. In my previous life, I would have handed over that money without a second thought, a silent martyr, a woman molded by expectation and obligation. But not this time. I let out a cold laugh, the kind that surprises even me, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Pay your son's tuition? Dream on, old lady. This is my startup capital." She blinked, stunned by my audacity, but I didn't care. Mark, ever the dutiful son, stood behind her, his face twisting in irritation. He always expected me to sacrifice for him, always expected my life to be a footnote in his success. But I wouldn't be that woman anymore. I could feel the tension in the air. The neighbors, the ones who had praised me for years for supporting Mark's dreams, murmured in disbelief. They knew how the story would go. Grace, the obedient wife, sacrificing for her husband's future. But today was different. I was different. I turned to Mark, whose expression had barely shifted from smug indifference. "Mark," I said, my voice steady and cold, "we're getting a divorce." For a moment, it felt like the entire world paused. Mark stared at me in shock, his face paling. He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't wait. I turned away, the sound of my footsteps growing louder as I walked out of that suffocating house. This time, I wasn't running back to my parents, to their endless lectures on enduring, on being the good wife. This time, I was leaving, and nothing was going to stop me. I rented the cheapest room in a guest house with the last of my savings. As I lay on that lumpy mattress, I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, but also the possibility of something new. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. The money, the dowry, the years of labor, it was all a part of my past life. In this new life, I would be the one writing my story. And the first chapter was about taking what was mine. I withdrew every cent I had left, 300 yuan, and headed to the bank. The clerk looked at me with an odd mix of pity and curiosity, but I didn't care. With that money in my hands, I felt a sense of power I hadn't known before. I wasn't just Grace, the wife who sacrificed everything. I was Grace, the woman who could build an empire from nothing. The divorce was easy to arrange. Mark didn't fight me. He didn't care. He was too busy chasing after his future with Emily. But I was determined to sever every last tie that bound me to him. I refused to let anyone make me feel guilty for choosing myself. I walked into the district marriage registration office and slapped down the divorce papers. The clerk looked at me like I was insane. "Are you sure about this, miss?" she asked. Her voice held a kind of judgment that seemed to pierce me. But I was done with caring about how others saw me. "I'm sure," I said, my voice low and firm. The paperwork was processed, and just like that, I was free. The moment I walked out of the marriage registration office, I felt a weight lift off my chest, but also the sting of freedom. Behind me, I could hear the angry screech of my mother-in-law, Martha, and Mark's pitiful protests. They were furious, but I wasn't interested in their wrath anymore. I had done what needed to be done, and nothing at all was going to hold me back. I didn't rush home to lick my wounds. No, I went straight to work. The world was changing, and I had to change with it. I wasn't going to be some forgotten woman who let her husband's dreams crumble her own. I would build my future, brick by brick, and I'd be damned if anyone, especially Mark and his mother, tried to stop me. I found a small storefront near the busiest commercial street in the county. The rent was steep, but the location was perfect. The space was empty, save for the remnants of a broken-down shop that had once sold knickknacks, but I could already see the future in that dingy little room. The future was mine, and I was going to carve my name into it. My first step was to buy a second-hand sewing machine. I couldn't afford anything new, but that old machine could work miracles if I was smart. I also bought fabric bold, unconventional, colors and patterns, pieces that no one in town would think to use. In the 1980s, fashion was still bound by strict traditions, but I knew the world was ready for something new. I was ready to lead that change. That night, I stayed up until the early hours of the morning, sketching designs, flared pants, batwing, tops, puff dresses. In my previous life, these were the things I had longed to wear, but had never dared to. In this life, they would be the mark of my revolution, and I would be the one to set the trends. The next few days passed in a blur of fabric, thread, and the hum of my old sewing machine. My fingers bled from the constant stitching, but I didn't care. This wasn't just a shop. It was my second chance, my redemption. Every garment I created felt like a declaration of independence. No more would I be known as Mark Carter's wife, the woman who gave everything for a man who never saw her worth. Finally, after a week of long days and sleepless nights, my first batch of clothes was ready. 10 pieces. 10 pieces that I had poured every ounce of myself into. They weren't just clothes, they were symbols of my new life. Opening day arrived, and the shop was bare of celebration. No balloons, no grand opening sales, just a small sign hanging above the door, Ni Chong. It didn't need anything else. I didn't want pity or applause. I wanted to prove something to myself. The first few hours were slow. People lingered outside, drawn in by the colors and patterns they'd never seen before, but none dared to enter. I heard whispers of doubt as they passed. "These clothes are too bold for the county. They're too modern," they murmured. "Can you really wear those pants in public?" My heart raced with anxiety, but I didn't let it show. This was just the beginning. I knew I had to take the first step, to lead by example. So, I walked out the door, dressed in the boldest outfit I had made, a vivid red batwing top paired with sleek black flared pants that made me feel taller, more powerful. I stood there, a living advertisement, and waited. The wind blew through my hair as I watched the crowd, waiting for someone to take the plunge. And then she appeared, Susan Zhao, a stylish young woman with eyes that sparkled like she had just discovered treasure. She stood outside for what felt like an eternity. But finally, she stepped inside. "Boss," she said, her voice hesitant but excited. "Can I try on the outfit you're wearing?" It was the moment I had been waiting for. "Of course," I said, my voice smooth, confident. She tried it on, and when she stepped out of the fitting room, I could see the transformation in her eyes. The outfit suited her perfectly, and she looked stunning. "I'll take it," she said without hesitation, handing me the money as though it were nothing. Her purchase was a signal, a beacon to everyone else. If she could wear it, so could they. By the end of the day, I had sold every single piece. My designs were more than just clothes. They were a statement. People wanted to be part of something new, something different, and I was their gateway. The next day, Susan returned, but she wasn't alone. She brought a group of girlfriends with her. They were all eager to try on my designs, and as each woman stepped out in my clothes, the buzz grew louder. Ni Chong became the talk of the county, and the orders started rolling in faster than I could keep up with. But it wasn't just about clothes, it was about power. It was about proving to everyone, especially Mark, that I didn't need him. I didn't need his validation, his money, or his so-called future. I was creating my own future, and I was doing it with my own hands. The success came faster than I had imagined. Within 3 months, I had already earned more than 10,000 yuans. It felt like an avalanche, a force I had no control over but also couldn't stop. I had come from nothing, but now my small shop had turned into the epicenter of fashion in the county. Every new design I produced was snapped up before it even hit the racks. My customers weren't just buying clothes. They were buying into a movement, into a vision of something bigger. Meanwhile, Mark's life was a far cry from mine. With my 300 yuans gone, he found himself scrambling to pay for his university tuition. Martha, his ever-present shadow, had to beg for loans, scrounging together a meager sum, but it wasn't enough. Mark's college life, once so promising, was now a daily struggle. He was wearing faded clothes, his stomach growling in the cafeteria while his classmates dined in comfort. The contrast between our lives could not have been more stark. He had once thought he could leave me behind, but I had outgrown him. Still, despite everything, I couldn't escape his presence. It lingered in the back of my mind, like a gnawing pain that wouldn't quite go away. He had once been my entire world, and as much as I hated him for it, I couldn't fully rid myself of the remnants of that history. But now I was focused on the future, and that future had nothing to do with him. It was during one of my late nights at the shop, balancing orders and calculating how much I could reinvest in my business, that I received an uninvited visitor. The door creaked open, and there he was, Mark. His clothes were threadbare, and he looked like a ghost of the man he once was. His eyes were bloodshot, his face haggard from months of stress. For a moment, I thought I might not recognize him. He had always been so confident, so sure of himself. But now he looked like a defeated man, one who had been chewed up and spit out by the world he thought would bow to him. "Grace," he muttered, his voice thick with bitterness. "You're living well, aren't you?" I didn't even look up from my ledger. "Thanks to you," I said flatly, not missing a beat. He stepped closer, eyes dark with resentment. "You planned this all along, didn't you? Divorcing me, getting rid of me so you could line your pockets. You were just waiting for your escape." I finally raised my eyes, meeting his gaze without a trace of emotion. "I didn't need to plan anything, Mark. I just needed to leave. And as for the money, you can keep thinking it was about that, but it wasn't. I don't need you or your debts. You were never the reason I succeeded." He faltered, the anger bubbling up beneath the surface. "You're ruthless, Grace." I smiled, the kind of smile that had taken years of pain and suffering to perfect. "I am," I said, my voice cold, "and I'm not going to feel guilty about it." Mark's face twisted in frustration, but then his expression shifted. His tone dropped lower, almost pleading. "I need help, Grace. I'm desperate. You're doing well. You owe me something, don't you? After everything we went through together?" I stood up from my desk, my chair creaking under the sudden movement. "No, Mark. We're divorced. You've got nothing from me now." His eyes flashed with fury. "You can't just leave me to rot. You owe me, Grace. We were married. You were supposed to support me." I stepped forward, not intimidated by the man who once had every power over me. "You don't get to make demands anymore. We're done. I owe you nothing. And if you dare threaten me again, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are. I will make sure your precious future gets destroyed once and for all." For a second, I thought he might lash out, but he didn't. His shoulders slumped, the fight leaving him as quickly as it came. He turned on his heel and walked out of my shop defeated. I knew that it wasn't over, that he would always be lurking in the shadows, but I didn't care. I had no more room for him in my life. I couldn't afford to get distracted. There was a bigger world waiting for me. Soon I expanded. I opened a second branch in the provincial capital, where the competition was fiercer, but the rewards were greater. I invested every penny I made into the business, pouring myself into it like I had never poured myself into anyone or anything before. It wasn't just about making money. It was about proving that I could do this on my own, that I didn't need Mark or anyone else to define me. My designs became the talk of the town. Women, young and old, were clamoring for the unique, bold pieces I created. Every dress, every blouse, every pair of pants told a story, and that story was mine. But then, just when I thought I had everything figured out, someone unexpected walked into my life. His name was Timothy Gu, a military officer, tall, sharp, and commanding. We had barely exchanged words in my past life, but in this life, he was a stranger who seemed to be everywhere I went. One day, while I was overseeing the launch of my new collection, he walked into the shop. The moment he stepped through the door, the room seemed to quiet down, and all eyes were on him. His uniform gleamed with authority, but there was something more beneath the surface, something that made my heart beat just a little faster. He looked around at the designs, his expression unreadable. Then his gaze landed on me. "I've heard about you," he said, his voice even and steady. I raised an eyebrow, unsure what to make. of his attention. Have you now? I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He nodded. Your designs are impressive. They've made quite a name for themselves. He paused, as if deciding whether to continue. I'm Timothy Gu. I've been meaning to stop by. I have a younger sister, Lily. She's been admiring your work for a while. I nodded, my mind racing. I had heard of Lily, but I didn't expect her brother to show up in my shop. Please, take a look around, I said. Whatever you like, it's on the house. For Lily, Timothy's eyes softened, and he gave me a small, appreciative smile. Thank you, but no need for discounts. I'm here to support you. Your business is remarkable. That was the first time I saw him as more than just a passing figure in my life. There was something about his presence, his quiet strength, that seemed different from anyone I had met before. The days that followed were a whirlwind of success, but Timothy's presence lingered in the back of my mind. He visited the shop a few more times, each time bringing a new piece of praise, and each time he left with a little more than I had expected. There was something unspoken between us, something that hinted at the possibility of a connection neither of us had fully acknowledged, but life had a way of throwing more curveballs. I had barely caught my breath after the grand opening of my provincial branch when disaster struck. The call came one night, while I was reviewing my accounts in the back room of my shop. It was Lily, Timothy's younger sister. Her voice, usually cheerful, was thick with panic. Grace, I need your help. Timothy, he's been hurt. He's in the hospital. My heart nearly stopped. What happened? Is he okay? It's serious. He's hurt badly. His leg's broken, but that's not all. It's worse than we thought. He might not be able to return to the army. Grace, you need to come. I didn't hesitate. The moment I hung up, I locked up the shop and rushed to the hospital. Timothy had been injured on a mission, something dangerous. That had happened in the field. When I arrived at the military hospital, the sight of him, lying in bed with his leg in a cast, shattered something deep within me. I was used to seeing soldiers strong, resilient, unbreakable, but Timothy wasn't like them. The pain in his eyes made me see him in a way I never had before. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a man vulnerable, needing care, needing protection. I stayed by his side as much as I could, bringing him homemade meals, staying late to talk, to tell him funny stories about the shop, about how my business was growing. But it was more than just a distraction. There was something about him that made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore. Weeks passed, and one afternoon, just as I was walking into his room with a thermos of warm broth, I froze. The room was dim, but I saw her, Emily Shen. Her presence was unexpected. She sat beside Timothy's bed, her voice soft, like she belonged there. Timothy seemed surprised to see me, his expression distant and unreadable. Grace, you're here, Emily said, her smile a little too bright, a little too practiced. I walked in, setting the thermos down on the table with more force than necessary. What are you doing here? My voice was steady, but there was a cold edge to it that I couldn't hide. Emily's eyes flickered for a moment before she recovered, her smile widening. I'm just visiting Captain Gu. I heard from the girls at the shop that he was in the hospital, and I thought I'd come by to see him. He's a hero after all. I didn't believe her. There was something off about her, something in her eyes that didn't match her words. I turned to Timothy, who was watching us silently, his brows furrowed. Did you know she was coming? I asked, my voice cool but not unkind. Timothy hesitated. No, I didn't expect anyone. I looked at Emily, who was now nervously smoothing the apple she had been trying to peel. Is that so? I said, my tone sharp. Because I find it strange that you knew exactly which hospital to come to. Which room, for that matter. Emily's face faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered, her voice trembling. I just asked around. It's not like I did anything wrong. My instincts were screaming. This was no coincidence. There was a purpose to her visit, a deeper agenda I couldn't put my finger on. I stared at her for a moment, and then my gaze shifted to Timothy, who was looking at me now with concern. Before I could speak, Emily interrupted. Captain Gu, you don't remember me? We've met before, at the shop. I'm Emily Shen, Grace's classmate. We spoke when you came in last time. Timothy seemed to consider this, but his frown deepened. I'm sorry, but I don't remember. I've met a lot of people. Emily's smile tightened, and I felt the weight of the silence between us. She wasn't here just to visit. She had an agenda, and it was starting to unfold. I had already lived through one betrayal this time. I wasn't going to be caught off guard. I didn't say anything at first, but I let the tension linger. Finally, I spoke, my voice quiet but firm. "You're Mark's girlfriend, aren't you? The same Mark who destroyed my life and has made a habit of showing up in mine uninvited." Emily froze. Her face drained of color, and for a moment, I thought she might crumble under the weight of the truth. But instead, she stood up quickly, her eyes widening in shock. You're lying." "No," I replied, my voice steady. "You've been spying on us, haven't you? Trying to gather information for Mark. He's probably still trying to get me back, isn't he? So he can use me again." Emily was silent, but her silence spoke volumes. It was all I needed to confirm my suspicions. Timothy looked between us, confusion clouding his expression. But then something changed in his eyes. His gaze hardened, and the tension in the room grew thick. "Who are you really, Emily?" he asked, his voice low and commanding. She stammered, clearly caught off guard. But I wasn't done. "I know your game. You thought I wouldn't recognize you. You thought I was too weak, too naive to see through your lies. But I'm not that woman anymore. Mark's little game is over." Emily's eyes flashed with panic. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door, but before she could leave, I turned to Timothy. "If you want the truth, then let's expose it." Timothy stood, his expression now steely and resolved. "What are you talking about, Grace?" I turned back to Emily, who was now shaking. "Let's bring him in. Let's see how long it takes for your boyfriend to fall apart under the pressure. Maybe you will finally see what happens when you try to manipulate the wrong person."